Don't you wish you lived in a sane world? You see what fear and confusion, hysteria, what all these things create? It destabilizes everything and everybody down to the cognitive levels. And that includes your organizations, institutions, and governments. I mean, at some point, you're going to have to realize that that's not sustainable, right? That's just not sustainable. We have to overcome this. We have to move past this. And the irony is that so many people that are in those positions of power are unwilling to even be helped in a way that's rational, much less resign, give up those positions so they minimize their own damage from being ruled by the fear and confusion. And the reason why that is they're still incentivized by the system, and they're making money, right? Because at that point you can justify all kinds of things with greed, right? I mean, the propensity of the human heart in darkness, when it's ruled by fear and confusion, right? The propensity of the human being, all of us, to deceive ourselves is really unfathomable in a lot of ways. Because if it was more fathomable, right, people could really understand it, your history wouldn't be the way it is. Now, would it? So it's just something to consider. As I sit here and I watch things, I find it incredibly frustrating to deal with a world, much less, just my neighborhood, right, where people are in fear and confusion. I mean, fear and confusion creates the conditions for all kinds of extremely destructive cascade effects, particularly within a psychosocial framework, right? And when that's being fed with inputs of drugs, right, and every other kind of thing that's destructive, well, what do you think is going to happen to the society? It's going to have amplified entropy across all the 7 spheres. That's what happens. When we approach problems, right, it's really easy to get stuck in the problem. And it's real easy for that to fuel more fear, anxiety, right, confusion, right, and a desire to control. But it does not aid you in actually solving the problem. So, again, it actually cuts off proper thinking to be able to work on those problems in a way that is most effective and efficient, and it limits your ability to adapt and be resilient in those times of crisis. So, we need to think through what we have. You always start with, what do you have? How can you repurpose, reuse, right? Modify? And what is it going to take to do that, right? When you're dealing with, here's the problem set, right? Now, let's start with what we have, to start looking at what we have to work with and what we may need to augment to be able to solve the problem, or at least mitigate it in a way where it doesn't create another set of cascades and becomes bigger, right? So that takes understanding across multiple disciplines. It means that you're going to have to think outside of the area you're comfortable, your AOR, right, in a way. So we have a lot of things in this country we can use. We can repurpose. We can think differently about how we use it. And we also have a lot of things, right, that we haven't discovered yet that we may be able to use in totally different ways. And all of those things need to fit into an ecosystem approach. So you need people that understand how things can connect, complex systems, if you will, to then bring those pieces together, and then people that understand how to bring those organizations together and manage them, right, to get these things done in a way that provides, right, that adaptability, that resilience, and that problem solving that you need in a fast track kind of way. And that's kind of essentially what I've been trying to get you guys to think about. What do you have, right? I mean, you have to start getting this in your head now, because once you're in the thick of a crisis, if it's not second nature for you, you're not going to be able to think this way. It's actually going to be shut down, right? You're only going to rely on what you absolutely know, and even that's going to narrow, because that's the nature of fear, anxiety, stress, especially when you're in chaos. So one of the things that I tell people to do is drive around your town, drive around your city. What's not being used that could be used in a different way, right? Or used the way that was originally designed, right? And maybe modified, right? What do you have already in place? What are the ways that this is where you sandbox, you can be very creative. How can we do something different with this, right? How can we take what's being ignored, thrown away, unused, underutilized, right? Or is being used, right? We have a lot of. How can we repurpose it and reuse it for different things in different ways? And what is it going to take to do that, right? Challenge yourself to think critically and creatively together, right? So if you're dealing with, for example, regardless of the politics behind it, fertilizer, right? Food production. There are all kinds of ways that we can augment what we already have, right? And there are all kinds of things that we can use to actually serve the needs to provide what we need to do it, right? Both in terms of traditional farming, right? In land use, but also in terms of urban farming and repurpose and reuse of large buildings, for example, big box stores, right? There are a lot of ways to think differently, and even in cities, you've got large, wide open spaces, right? So there are ways of thinking about what do you have, how can it serve multiple purposes, multiple uses, and when you're designing something from the ground up, this is also a great exercise, in terms of thinking down line, right? For things that may be needed in terms of how you repurpose or can adapt these things for other uses in times of crisis, right? And even after a crisis, how can they continue to be used so that you're not wasting resources, right? Financial and otherwise. So it's a way of thinking, right? And this is where it's really important. There are a lot of people that have great ideas, and they know what's in their local areas. They know what's used, what's not used, what could be. They have a history in that area. There are things there that people, maybe don't realize are even there, right? And there's skill sets that haven't been mobilized. So you need to get that in your head if you're a decision maker in terms of what are you going to do? How are you going to mobilize people? The best thing you could do in a crisis is to mobilize people for a common purpose, right? To get them to work together, right? And give them opportunities to play the role that they already have capabilities, skills, and talents and know-how to do, right? You incentivize that, right? That's something that we haven't been doing, right? Because we've taken on a corporate frame of mind and a top-down frame of mind in this country. And our academic system doesn't teach critical and creative thinking skills, right? We don't teach how things are integrated. So, but it doesn't mean there's not people that already know how to do it or that have pieces of it, right? So you got to quarterback that. You bring all those pieces together. You've got to essentially coach it, right? And then you've got to create an architecture for that, and you're going to do it very fast. And in a crisis, right? If you're not in a place where you're already thinking that way and it's second nature, well, it's going to be damn near impossible for you to do it, right? That's the reality of why it's so important, not only to have servant leaders, but also leaders that are adaptive, right? And leaders that understand that their job is to bring others together to do bigger things, right? It's the aggregated whole. And it's also really important, right, that you have people that can bring those pieces together, project manage, right? Think about skill sets. Project management there's a general conceptual framework for project management that can work across all the disciplines, right? Across all the industries to one degree or another, right? It just needs to be augmented, right? And reformed and reframed for that industry. And you pair them up with people that know that industry really well, right? So then they can provide that kind of pathway for project management within multiple disciplines, multiple industries in a time of crisis, right? But you got to know, right? And you've got to think beyond your C-suite, right? Beyond, right, your executive headquarters and your offices, right? And that goes for the government too, right? If you think the government's going to be fixing everything for you, you got another thing coming, right? The government plays a role in that, right? But it really boils down to you. It boils down to the public, the private sector, and the citizenry. And it's going to take leaders, right? So you got to give people the opportunity to stand up, and you got to mobilize people, and you also have to inspire people. If everything is fear, right? When the real big crisis, and it really is dramatos land, and chaos is ensuing, you're going to lose control of it if you haven't done it now. That's why it's important to mobilize people now for a greater purpose, a greater cause, incentivize them to do it, encourage them to do it, empower them to do it, coach them, right? Mentor them, and then architect them together, right? Think about how IDEO works, right? Divergent people, divergent backgrounds, right? All working on common problems, and they all create amazing solutions because they're approaching it from different ways, right? But you still have to quarterback it. And when you're dealing with creating solutions that have to fit into a broader contextual framework and complex systems, for example, what you have to do is you have to have people understand complex systems and understand how these pieces fit together, as best that anybody can, because it's complex, right? And those people need to create the architecture, know where those pieces are, bring those pieces together, the organizations, right? The individuals, all the way down, right? And back up, right? To the local level, right? So it's not a top down or bottom up, it's both, right? But we think like this, we think like a pyramid, right? It's still the top down, we don't like the mavericks, we don't like the independent thinkers, all that. That's going to be the kiss of death, and it's going to lead to failure. And it sure as hell is not going to solve your problems, it's actually going to create more of them. That's why I keep harping away at this and why I'm so intense about it, because I keep warning about things occurring, right, ahead of the time. And whenever I warn on something, right, I actually have already worked on solutions where I game things out, and I've got a portfolio of things that could be done, right? That keeps me sharp, right? It keeps me from just getting bogged down in the anxiety and concern and fear and all the stuff that comes with crisis or potential crisis, but it allows me to look at the problems, right? Put that problem into a complex system, into a map, right? And then work on solutions that fit in that and see how that works within the context of those broader solution sets in that complex system, right? It's an integrated approach, right? That is not happening enough. And there are people like me sitting around this country, all over the country, that have amazing skills, right? They have a huge heart. They want to actually help others. They want to serve. They want to make a difference. And you're absolutely ignoring them because of your politicization, right? You're marginalizing them. You're actually harming them. And by the time, in some cases, you know you absolutely need them because it's your survival on the line, they may be so damaged, right, and screwed up, right, from all the stuff that you created in the meantime to bring you to a place where you realize you now need them, that they may not be able to help you. That's why I'm telling you this stuff now, right? Things have real world consequences. Decision making has real world consequences that are not siloed. That's why I always say nothing happens in a vacuum here, right? Over and over and over again, right? You have to think down the line. It's why I say leaders have to have vision, right? They have to be willing to sacrifice things, right, for the benefit of those they lead. And in the paradigm that you have right now across, in academia and across the board in this country, I mean, there's a reason why you're suffering the stuff that you're suffering right now. Look at the water situation, right? Controlling the water is not going to do it for you. Having a national plan where people can take part in it, well, that would have done it, which is why I did it years and years and years ago, right? So when I criticize about something specifically and I'm angry about it, it's because, guess what? You didn't listen, right? There were tons of options and solutions, right, that could have occurred, but you didn't want to do it. So now we all have to pay the price, and yet you still are doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results, and all you want is more control, and all that you're going to get is chaos. See my point?